Welcome back to the Canadian Cannabis Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a minute, been a few weeks, some transitions happening, taking place, dialing it back in, syncing up with Serena Donovan today, CEO of Mary Jane Manor out of Southern Alberta. What a story, what an enterprise. Mary Jane, small world, big industry connections coming to fruition here today. I couldn't be more pleased to speak with you, especially following up this weekend here in Manitoba for me, which I'll share more about. With no further ado, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Mary Jane Manor and what we can expect to move forward in our episode today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. It's such a pleasure to talk to you as well. As you mentioned, my name is Serena Donovan. I am the CEO, president, and owner of the Mary Jane Manor, which is Canada's first private cannabis boutique hotel. And so we have brought this to market. It's been a journey, but it's been lots of fun. And we come at this from a grow perspective. We also have a retail store, and now we've added the Mary Jane Manor. So we are 100% in cannabis in this industry.
I know when I came across your YouTube stream promotional video that this little piece of heaven existed in Canada. Absolutely ecstatic that it's a Canadian enterprise coming to fruition this way. And then learning what I could from that video, which I've watched several times and shared with a number of people, the same response over and over. In Canada, this is real. So here in Manitoba, we're going to talk a little bit more. I was at a Winnipeg 19 Plus Adult Expo and Market through the weekend, an event that's commonly held here in Manitoba through Assiniboine Downs in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And also this year, different approach, advertising and marketing the welcomed environment of cannabis. Although no live product available for sale, obviously Decolonize Cannabis, the platform Flourish, was on site as well, invited as a guest speaker for public cannabis education. And knowing about Mary Jane Manor and the approach and the availability of space usage, next to this coming up and identifying with that, able to connect with the event organizer at the Winnipeg Plus to explain the importance of having someone of the intellect or industry knowledge at this time to participate through the weekend, share the public ed, break down some of the regulations and projections of what's to come for cannabis regulation or cannabis consumption regulation spaces. And I think it was fantastic. It was a great hit. But again, here in Manitoba, not live product, no consumption inbound. So, we're looking at that type of infrastructure and the facilities. I also, and I think viewers are aware, I work for a Pot Life Cannabis and Vape Shop. So a location that has been renovated and ready to roll out into consumption lounging. And a number of things have rolled out with that as well. So the development of cannabis consumption education, which is a project I'll be taking on with a colleague of ours, Anuraga, you know what I mean? So very much happy about how that's all going to move forward. But if you wouldn't mind, so I know we're going to come back on, we're going to talk about the flower a little bit and the grow space and the evolution. But if you could share a little bit just for the trailblazing and what it was like as far as working with the Alberta licensed gaming and cannabis towards setting up from the build up, knowing what you wanted to accomplish through Mary Jane Manor, and anything that stands out as far as that, putting it together, actually coming to life, any setbacks, the trials, tribulations, just some advice for people like myself entering into that area. And for all Canadians and viewers, if you don't mind to share some of that history with the Mary Jane Manor, please.
Excellent. Okay, well, the history is quite short. We actually purchased this building in November of last year, actually November 15th. So we're coming up on 1 year. My husband and I like I said earlier, we've immersed ourselves in the cannabis industry. And so when we bought this hotel, we could have done two different business plans. There is multiple solar projects going in the north end of Vulcan County, and we could have just done a real quick renovation on this project and had the hotel basically full to contractors for the next 2 years while they're building these projects. Or I said, maybe we need to think outside the box and we need to figure out if we can do a cannabis friendly space. And so I reached out to Alberta Health Services, which governs the ability to still designate cigarette smoking rooms. So as a hotel owner, I can still designate rooms that are cigarette smoking. I'm not interested in that. So I asked him if I could designate cannabis friendly rooms, and he said yes, because when a consumer or customer pays to stay in that space, it becomes their private residence. And so then he pushed it back to the municipality. Now I will go back a little bit and say I was on county council when our council wrote the land use bylaw for legalization. And I had a very proactive council, and we decided as a group that we were not going to exclude cannabis as an industry in Vulcan County. And so we didn't write proactive or prohibitive rather, a land use bylaw. So we allow consumption in people's homes, in their private spaces, in public spaces. We didn't restrict it. There are municipalities that are very, very restrictive, and this would never fly in those municipalities. So I was very fortunate that way. And so then I decided to take it one step further and said, okay, if I can designate cannabis-friendly rooms, then I'm gonna take this a little bit more private, and we rent the space like an Airbnb. And so you get all 15 rooms. There is 2 lounge areas. There's a Greenhaven lounge upstairs, and then there is a kitchen area. So groups can come in, they can cook. We could bring in a chef that could do an infused meal. Everybody stays, right? We're not worried about then people driving after they've consumed edibles or those kinds of things. And we then get to use the space for education, information, just talking about cannabis. We cannot and are not promoting cannabis consumption, but we allow it. And so in saying that, you know, if Respect My Region wanted to come out and do an event here, your guests are by your invitation. And you can designate what that looks like. If you only want consumption outside, you get to decide that. If you allow it in the lounge, in people's rooms, in the hallways, in the entrance, that's completely up to you. I allow it inside and outside. I'm not going to restrict where you can consume and how you can consume. And so, yeah, I just want the space to be a safe place for people to gather. You are huge into education. We as consumers, we need more education. And as licensed producers, our hands are cuffed. We're not allowed to talk about the product we're growing, and it's a real shame. And so that's kind of why and how it all came about.
You nailed it. Absolutely. And including the introduction of Mary Jane Manor to myself, again, with Qualium Consulting, that education piece is what brought it around big time. Ultimately, being an avid consumer and the passion drive for the industry development, to being a directive of saying exactly that. How would it look arranging to meet with RMR down in that space and looking ahead for the consumption and the here. So yeah, I can only imagine, because so this event, I wanted to bring that up and then compare a little bit to the Winnipeg 19 plus with vendors, cannabis friendly vendors invited. Everything was licensed, including gaming. So off to the side, free casino type atmosphere, really bringing in a mini Amsterdam event to Winnipeg over 2 days. Right. Now, there were vendors who were using cannabis product within their art, for example, and familiar to regulatory affairs in that regard, definitely had been appropriate. So the non-accessible, non-consumable glossening or rosining over of live flower or images of flower leaves, obviously not accessible. Now, there was a vendor that had introduced flower shake in vials as for necklaces. And unfortunately, before I could connect with them for an interview and to discuss, they were the one that had actually, they were asked to leave the event based on that live flower accessibility. So I was able to connect with the organizers afterwards, spoke briefly with that vendor as they left the Friday night's event, and then also spoke publicly about some of the regulations included and the tricky maneuvering it takes to actually navigate. One for myself as a digital marketer and moving into brand marketing with Respect My Region and Decolonize Cannabis, but trying to identify for people in the audience that particularly event organizers and license holders, that navigation can become tenfold real quick when there's high-end dollars of fine ramifications being introduced as a potential spook method. So I think we brought it home yesterday in identifying that working together culturally, because we had burlesque, there was some taboo, There was all kinds of things that I've never, even in my days of university, had thought to explore as far as seeing. But the fact that I could be there as a cannabis representative of the education and identify with people that culturally, this is part of it. There are cannabis consumers obviously identified in this market that the event organizers have agreed, obviously, I would say safely from the past of cannabis use in general, whether they smell it on people from inside or outside or however, but to say, okay, regulations are changing, let's bring this to that environment. And so I focused a lot on that. We have a licensed event was actually liquor. So we know that the controversy and discussion right now nationally regarding liquor use with mixing cannabis. So, but at the same time, we had liquor license as well as cannabis promotion, and the buildup of that as to what Manitoba is going to look like when we have spaces available where those are both introduced and consumed, including following back on some other episodes of the Canadian Cannabis Podcast, music events through the summer tour that I attended, where cannabis mobile dispensaries were actually being introduced. So product was being purchased, selling out super quick, like anyone would expect, but also licensed event of liquor being introduced. From my understanding and take on it, totally incident free from anything that I've seen. So as far as navigating those boundaries and trying to set a precedent, I think I honed in on that yesterday to say that if anyone wants to look at it and pat yourselves on the back, if you stepped out of the box and open your mind, like to the extent that I had in that environment, to have an opportunity to expose cannabis education, but ultimately realizing at the end of the day, the space was surrounded, because I went there to represent cannabis and I actually walked away with a wealth of understanding in a number of other genre or cultural walks of life, non-judgmental and nothing to fear. It was actually quite beautiful. And I feel great today from what I took in through the weekend. Was able to open up a little bit more and kind of get my focus back on what it actually is I want to do in the industry. So I think about it, how it feels to walk into that environment, chest out, knowing that cannabis is here, the build up next year, maybe we'll be selling it on site. I dialed in a number of retailers, but I can only imagine, what is it like? What's the general response when you have your clients come to Mary Jane Manor, even those that would be familiar and built up of the cannabis brand? And so if you can explain now a little bit about that, the buildup. You started with a product. Manitobans are familiar with the Mary Jane product, the flower, and if there's anything about that, what was it like introducing for you? And I've had good response from Albertan license holders with regard to the Manitoba market. And I can say that promoting Mary Jane Manor over the last month and a half, anyone in Manitoba is like, again, this is in Canada. I want to go there. So, I mean, if you could shed that, like, what's the commonality of people when they come in? Do they want to spark up right away? Are they just completely overwhelmed? And then on top of it, like, even again, the flower, do you provide it there? Or how does some of that work? And then like the education sessions that are held there, a little bit of a background on how does that look? Because I know we're looking to bring that here into Manitoba as well.
Mm-hmm. That's all great questions. So we do not provide flower. We do have a dispensary that's attached to the front of the hotel. It's actually across the hallway. So if you come in the main doors, you can turn one way and go into the Because You Can cannabis dispensary, where you can purchase my product Because You Can flower and pre-rolls. And then you can go across the hall to the other way and you can walk into the Mary Jane Manor. I will say the overwhelming response for everybody when I say you can literally smoke a joint the second you walk in the door is, "Are you sure? We're inside. I can't believe we can do this." And I said, but this is the whole purpose of the space, is as the owner, when I invite you in, this is my home. And so I want for you to feel comfortable consuming the way you choose. And then we just get to start talking, right? I mean, the people that I've met, the reasons why people, the reasons why they consume, the reasons why they found this plant are all different, but very, very similar. And the camaraderie that we get in this industry, whether it be, licensed producers, retails, or consumers, it's all just something that we all need to learn from each other.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Was there anything outstandish as far as startup? I know some of the time frame you're putting out right now between launching licensed production to opening Mary Jane. It obviously sounds a lot like it spanned through COVID era, ultimately. If there was anything that pops out as far as any COVID setbacks in startup, as well as anything outstandish when it comes to the licensing. And I know you mentioned, it actually seemed quite simple looking at navigating your way through introducing the cannabis. But has there been any setback, minor or minimum, like anything that really had you scratching your head on a new approach of how to kind of get around that regulation and anything like do you understand that? Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, if there's one thing I do know about the industry, it's regulation. And I knew very early that compliance is top priority. I have too much to lose by being non-compliant in the Mary Jane Manor, because I would then lose the license to be able to sell my Because You Can flower to the province of Alberta, as well as it would put the license for the store to sell cannabis products to the consumer at risk. AGLC, which is Alberta Gaming Liquor Commission, they told me very early that they do not like what's going on here, that there's nothing to compare it to because it's so new. And I said, well, there is nothing to compare it to, but let's talk about it. Let's just talk about it. And so, of course, consumption was a concern. And I said, but why is it a concern? I can smoke cannabis in my home. I can choose to smoke cannabis outside. As adults in a world where we get free choice every day, I don't understand why this has to be an issue. And they said point blank, we are going to be watching you very closely. I said, that's fine. I'm okay with that. And we will never grant you a liquor license for the facility. And I said, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. As much as I'm not endorsing consumption, I'm also okay if people don't have access to alcohol in this space. And I'm never going to push the blending of the two substances. Right. I'm not going to say you shouldn't, because it's not my place to tell you how to use any substance in your body, right? It's not my place to dictate you as an adult making your decisions. But I can then say to people who do come, you can't get a liquor license for here because I am allowing cannabis. There has not been an issue. People bring their own product. To sit around the lounge and see a group of women who were here for a women's retreat all bring their flower that they've grown at home, that they are so proud of, that all smell amazing, they all grow differently, they all use different nutrients, and the passion and the pride that they have, that we all have as consumers and as producers, needs to be able to come through. And so there is no level of licensing that is required here. I mean, I have an occupancy permit, making sure everybody's safe in the building, but there's no business license in Balkan County. There is no provincial license that binds me, and there is no Health Canada license that binds me. I have done the respectful thing, and this is an adult only, so 18 plus in Alberta. No children are allowed on premise. And no children will be. I've got 5 grandchildren. I don't want my grandchildren exposed to cannabis at an early age, and I want their parents to decide what that looks like, right? And so it was a matter of kind of knowing which regulations I could fall into, and really the only one would have been a food safe license if we maintained the restaurant that was on site. We decided to change it into a dispensary, and it has its own separate license by AGLC to sell cannabis products. After you leave that door, there's no license on the Mary Jane Manor side.
Wow, impressive. That is something else. Absolutely. And you kind of answered the question there, because I was started to spin up, and I was wondering, I know you mentioned to kick it off at the switching over of the restaurant and then coming back to it. And that's what I wanted to know. Like, generally, are people, is it something that you ideally, even though you turn that off, would you ideally look ahead at that service with edibles, for example, or infused dinner parties? Is that something that is still, does it come up with guests now not having the restaurant there? Is it something that might come back into play down the line, or is it that just too complicated?
No, I mean, right now the building is right next door to a restaurant bar. My son-in-law's mother owns it. We have a fabulous working relationship. She will cater. She will shut the bar down for private events. She'll bring in bands. She's happy to look after all the cooking and all the alcohol service. So that then makes it so that, you know, the alcohol space is over at her place, the cannabis space is over at my place. We obviously can't do both under the same roof, and we're okay with that. When it comes to people staying here or hosting an event, you could hire a cannabis chef. They can come in, their liability is what covers them at that event. And the nice part is, you know, I mean, this facility sleeps up to 58 people. You could serve 58 people an infused meal and everybody stays. And so nobody is then putting society at risk. We all know that that's not an issue, right? I mean, I don't know of an individual who's been elevated by an edible that goes gangbusters ego out and destroys all kinds of things, right? We're very, very aware that we should not do certain activities. And so for me, it gives it that intimate feel where you can have a meal and you can experience things together. And then at the end of the night, you're all going in your own separate directions to your rooms. And then the next morning you're getting up and nobody's hungover and feeling like crap. And you're going next door to have a buffet and you get to just have fun.
I'm more and more excited. Another question. I'm curious. So in Alberta has 4 plants, recreational plants per household. Abiding by that is commercially. So, like, would Mary Jane Manor qualify as a household within that recreational grow federal licensing? And during the summer, do you have 4 plants around the yard, like around the premises that like people get to see like live on that they might not have ever grown themselves or under? Is that, I'm not sure. I haven't looked that far. I'm curious. I'm going to look into it now, but I'm wondering, like, does a commercial residence fall under that? Like, could you have 4 plants per your site?
And that's something I'll actually have to look into.
Cool.
Eventually, I would like to find full-time caretakers and have this running as a full-time cannabis boutique hotel. At that point, when it is actually somebody's private residence, but it is a commercial spot, I don't know. I'm going to have to do some research on that. There may be a way to have like a greenhouse in the back that is under lock and key by the caretakers. And then at a certain point, they could invite you in to see their plants, right? It would be kind of invitation only. There's not a lot of kids, you know, on the neighboring commercial properties. And so it's really about just making sure that those protection items are in place so that the cannabis industry does not get the negative stigma that it automatically comes with, right? This is the way to prove to the public, to prove to the governing agencies that this is okay. Lots of it is just about conversation and that safe place to consume. I mean, I consumed too much with my daughters for the first time, and they saw it coming before I did. And it was not nice. I'll be honest. I mean, they helped me through a real uncomfortable time. And had they not been there, I say all the time, had I not had those trusted individuals, I'm the personality where I never would have touched a THC product again. And that would have been a real shame because I would have missed a lot, right? And so if you were to invite a group, or we're doing a women's retreat and there's people who are still kind of curious, I want that space where they can do an edible for the first time and have people close to them that are going to say, okay, you're almost at your 2-hour mark. How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? Are you not feeling okay? It just becomes that safe place for education and networking, right? I mean, this has not destroyed the world. And so we need to be able to prove that cannabis industry, cannabis events, cannabis consumption it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. We are all responsible individuals.
Hell yes. And you've got my wheels turning right now. Like, from the buildup and that projection and I've broken the ice with Mitch and Joey to say, you know, this spot looks deadly. After this episode and the follow-up that continues, definitely a spot maybe we could look at meeting. And now that you've kind of explained it, and I have a way better idea of how the operation is, building off of the, again, with Anuraga involved and being out in your neck of the woods, if the time frame works and say around spring, March, April, realistically, I'll have a research license in hand to have a meeting and a session with you out there with RMR and look even at some of the international market projection regulation and how that's all going to come to fruition. But you mentioned it there with catering, because Chef Jordan Wagman would be another guy to follow up with for this, because we brought him on here. I mean, full circle effect. I'm feeling it. I'm vibing it. I definitely want to work with you on going that way. Now, if you don't mind, let's finish up a little bit with some of your product information. I mean, I think it's worth, like I said, I've talked with people in Manitoba familiar with the Mary Jane product, obviously quality assured, top notch. If you want to plug some information right now as far as that magic going behind your plants and your final production, whether like the things that stand out for you, like in your pheno hunt, some of the great genetics that you're working with, if you're looking at topping up for the terpene, you know what I mean? Like anything that way, product drops coming, announcements or expectations. I have no problem at all right now taking as much of that information in as possible as well.
Excellent. Okay. Well, there's one little quick correction, and the flowers under the Because You Can label. So my micro cultivation and processing is called Because You Can. I did have product available early COVID because I was licensed in 2020. It was available in Manitoba. I was working with one of the local processors there. It was a struggle to move product to bud tenders and to consumers that you couldn't meet and you couldn't reach out to. And so I've been fortunate to find a processor in Edmonton that is helped me get 3 SKUs on the market in Alberta.
Nice.
The big push to open the store was in Alberta as a licensed producer. If we do not sell through that product sitting in the AGLC warehouse in 4 months, Serena, as the producer, has to buy it all back. And I cannot afford to do that. And so I opened a store. We are the only micro in Alberta that has a retail outlet. They are separate corporations, right? Because You Can is Corporation A, Mary Jane Manor is Corporation B, and Because You Can Cannabis is Corporation C.
Wow.
But we are able to source our own product. It's kind of ridiculous, I'm not gonna lie. So I have my processing license, I have my sales amendment now. So we can grow, process, put it in package, excise, and then have to ship it from Mossley, Alberta, all the way to Edmonton to the AGLC warehouse. And then at a different computer portal, as the retailer, I have to order product to my own store that is literally 2 miles away, but it has to make a 1,000-kilometer round trip. And I pay for shipping as the producer to get to Edmonton, and I pay shipping as the retail outlet to get it back to Mossley to sell in my store. It's a bit ridiculous, I'm not gonna lie. I really hope that with situations like this, we can show the provincial government how silly some of these things are. Like direct delivery in Alberta would be fabulous. Like this, right? I mean, I'm security cleared. I could literally drive 5 cases of product from the grow down to the retail store, sign all the paperwork that needs to be signed on either end, and track all of those things. Excise can still be paid. But what I'm also doing is giving that transparency to the industry that I think has been very sorely lacking as licensed producers. And you can come, you can tour my grow, you can see how we grow, you can see the plants. I'm very proud to say that we've never failed microbials, so none of the product that you are consuming that has my brand on it has ever had to be irradiated. If I won't consume it, it won't go through. And we've never had an issue. I've set extreme sanitation protocols, extreme QA, and it pays off, right? I mean, there's lots of people that say it's a weed, it's easy, it grows. It's not an easy plant to grow. And it's an easy plant to keep that kind of quote unquote clean all the way to the end. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. But, you know, a lot of protocol, a lot of policy, and the staff. I mean, I could not do what I'm doing without my staff, without my team. And we all have a passion for this plant that I think comes through. We're quite proud of it's a blueberry crossed with Gorilla Glue, crossed with Kush. And so it is the Blue Kush. And she oh gosh, she packs a bit of a punch, I'm not gonna lie. And she yields 29 to 32% on a consistent basis. Every time we take her down, she just gives us her best. And then we have some rotating strains. We did a pheno hunt on some Northern Lights, and we flowered out a few plants, and One of them smelled like lime bubble gum. I was so excited to see how she would test. And the other one had no aroma. And I was so disgusted. So I said to my son-in-law, Shane, I said, let's get them COA'd. Let's see how they do. Let's see if we're going to keep these genetics on the floor. And darn it, if they didn't both yield 32% on 5 sickly little plants. Yeah. And so, but it's figuring, it's figuring out which plants like our grow facility, I think, is our biggest win at the moment. We've had lots of struggles. I'm not going to lie. I think every grower on the commercial level has. But for us right now, it's figuring out which genetics work best in our grow facility. To have genetics in our grow facility that do not like it is no fun for us, and it's no fun for the plant. And so we're really focused on just figuring out which little ladies like the way we do things and like our facility. And so right now, we're very proud of what we've got going on.
Full circle, it sounds very much minus the 3 entities, and then working that around. And again, appreciate you in explaining that and opening up and actually explaining how that process is absolutely ridiculous. Now, though, you're operating almost essentially farm gate, close to farm gate, under 3 licenses to meet that objective. And I mean, over in Ontario, where they're topping 16 to 20 farm gate productions in general. So how about this at this particular time, knowing what you've had to hurdle through to make this a success? How important right now then is the Cannabis Act review with the panel announcement coming soon under Morris Rosenberg, the chair, some of the identified key goals what they plan to focus on. How important of a time now would it be as far as looking at that when you mention the hoops to jump through with the regulations, the affairs there, as well as the direct delivery for Alberta? So I think it's, from what you're saying, obviously crucial. And how do we go about making sure we get this on the radar for the panel as it's announced?
Well, and I think my biggest issue is when the federal government announced legalization, they should have built the framework and made all of the provinces comply. And I think the disservice to all of us, no matter how we are involved in the industry, is that they set a standard. They let the provinces make decisions, and every province let every municipality within that province also make their own guidelines and their own regulations. And you guys can't, every province is so different, and we shouldn't have all these differences. Yeah. We should just have one set of standard and everybody abides by it. Can you imagine how much easier it would have been for patients to have access, for consumers to have access, if we all just had one set of rules? Absolutely. And the rules didn't differ from every single province. And then excise needs to be one standard set rate, and we need excise reform. We need it. I mean, it is going to kill the industry. And then we need education. We need a way to be able to build brand dedication. It's great for me to talk to bud tenders. I need consumers to come and see me as the grower, as the licensed producer, as the store owner, as the owner of Mary Jane Manor, to say, you know what? Yeah, she's doing a damn good job, and I want to try some of her flower. And then I get to then know where my flower is in Alberta. That's the other sad thing. AGLC won't tell me what stores I have product in. I have to pay $100 a month per SKU. So $300 a month to know where my product is so that my consumers can find my product. I think consumers get frustrated if you can only find because you can product once in Okotoks or once in Calgary and you can't find it again. Obviously, you can't build that brand dedication. Right. Brand dedication is what's going to keep my grow open. And so, it's all of us just trying to scream the loudest under a compliant regime that it forces us to think outside the box. And I hope that, scenarios like this show every level of governance that there is some things that can work, and we can still keep society safe. We can still protect youth. We can still be under compliance, and it's not going to, it's not going to destroy the world by any means.
No, not at all. Standardization, you definitely nailed it. Normalization for sure. As far as the research and the work, I'm looking into the regulations now for the last month, which I'll be submersed in over the next 6 months. Absolutely. definitely honing in on the Cannabis Act review. I plan to connect with some of the panel as when it's announced. So I definitely take note of some of these discussions on where I like to see where their brains might be at with that as well. Now, the Blue Glue Kush, before we end off today, is it coming to Manitoba? By chance, are you looking at busting that one out over here?
Well, I am hoping to, yes, I'm working with a couple of processors. We're hoping to get some product into Manitoba. That is on the list. We're also hoping for Saskatchewan, Yukon, Northwest Territories. BC is a little bit tricky. BC is out on their island all by themselves at the moment. Very hard, but that's okay, right? And I mean, even if we can't, even if it gets really hard to get product in other provinces, we need to be proud of our provincial growers. We need to support our local farmers. And I say that as a farmer. We farm indoors, cannabis all year round, and we farm outdoors. And, you know, I mean, farm families need support. And yeah, so if you've got your favorite brand that is your local, continue to support them, because those are the ones that are going to keep everybody's head above water.
You bet. And I have a soft spot and empathy, much love for Alberta. I'm a Calgary born myself, so I spent 4 months at the start of the year out that way. I connected with a number of Calgary players I really enjoy, and I know the response has always been great from the Manitoba market as far as consumption goes for your products. But I'm going to do you a solid. I'm going to tell you right now, you are doing a hell of a job, a great job. You're shaking things up, and you know what I mean? I think a lot of the industry really should be proud of the headway you've made and the trailblazing that's been done. And you're still rocking it out. We're here talking today and really getting that information out. So there's a step up coming. I do cannabis product reviews through Decolonized Cannabis, become a little bit more popular in Canada over the course of this last year. It's making more sense as I collab with more brands and what I do, as well as the love from Respect My Region. And I'm looking for a particular product to start to feature through Respect My Region's platform, to share to a North American audience, 20,000 plus subscribers, million views per month. And I'd be more than happy to share a product review on that Blue Glue Kush if I can manage. So I do have family, thankfully, in Calgary. If I get some traveling happening and a potential to get that, or we can connect, and I am a bud tender. You want to connect with bud tenders? I'm a bud tender. We could line something up, but if you're okay with that, I'd love to consume that, do the research a little bit behind it, and share a large scale professional product review with that as well. Would be something dynamite.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd be honored. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Cool.
And you know, I mean, I will give a shout out to you right back. I mean, the fact that you're focusing on micro players, you know, I mean, you're focusing on the little guys. I'm just one person in this big ocean of very, very large players.
Yes.
And I don't know. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, maybe a geek every now and again, to figure out what's allowed and what's not under the regulations. And I think some people don't want to challenge. Some people get very comfortable with compliance and whether they want to think outside the box. I have no problem. I am a black and white girl. I am not a break the rules kind of girl, but I will tell you what the rule actually says and how I will make it work. Right. And, you know, I mean, before I opened the store, the inspector came in and said, well, you have to frost all the windows because we can't see product from the outside. And I said, no, actually I don't. And he said, yeah, you do. I said, no, the regulation states you can't see product. I will design my store. I will frost my display cases, but I will not frost my windows. I will not put my staff at risk for, I mean, there's been break-ins and things in the city. And he said, well, you have to. I said, I would invite you to go all the way up the chain as far as you need to find whether or not I am right or you are right. And I don't want to be confrontational, but I'm not opening my store with my windows frosted. And he called me 2 days later and he said, no, you're right. The regulation never stated that windows had to be frosted. I said, that's correct.
Awesome.
I will display cases. I will be well under compliance, but I will not frost my windows. And I licensed my store without frosted windows. And about 2 months after that, AGLC told all of the retailers that they could take all the frosting off of their windows. And so, yeah, I mean, it really wasn't me making that stink. There was a lot of other retailers who'd had staff put at risk. And the push was real. But the regulation says one thing. I will abide by what the regulation says, but don't put your spin on it and then not allow me to put my spin on it.
Yes. I hashtag it. I agree 100%, 150%. And I throw the hashtags around sometimes. In this industry, sometimes you've got to be a bit of a pirate and a voyageur. And I throw it out together, pirageur. It's just that component. So again, Serena, I appreciate you. I appreciate Mary Jane Manor. Thank you very much for taking the time to share this full-packed education session. It sounds like we're both leaving with a little bit of information we want to go look into a little further. If you have anything else to add, I'm going to close off a little bit, and then I'm going to leave it with you to shut us out of here. But throwing out love to my family and friends. I'm joining today, fresh in from Winnipeg, set up, went straight to Connecting with Serena, going live. I'm back in Westman for the winter. Much love to my homeboy, Derek Snow, hosting me for 4 months out in Winnipeg. And my much love again for my homeboy, Ryan. We're all University of Winnipeg alumni, bringing me back here today. I'm with my twins right now, with my kids, getting everything dialed back in. And I've got a hell of a pile of plans to follow up on while I'm out in this area. So you know me, Decolonize Cannabis, the Canadian Cannabis Podcast. Jordan Fleury, I'm your host and CEO of Flourish Ventures Limited. Most of you know where to find me. Otherwise, just keep an eye. I'm going to keep coming around. Serena, I'm turning it over to you. Share your love. Let us know where it's at. And then I'm going to end our stream.
Well, I just thank you for hosting me today, and thanks for dressing up. I kind of dressed up as a bit of a mad scientist or a bit of a kind of geek, let's say.
I knew what it is. I know.
Yeah, I'm not one that likes Halloween, so this is as step outside my box as you're going to get. But no, I very much appreciate being part of this, and anybody who wants to reach out, figure out how I didn't circumvent regulation. I'm working well within it. And if there's any way that I can help get somebody else to a place where they can look at doing something like this, I'm more than happy to help. If you're looking for products, let me know. I can tell you where you can find it. And other than that, I just look forward to talking to more individuals like you that are based and focused on education. And let's get the word out. Let's just get the word out and let's get people talking. And hey, if it just happens that we're doing a little bit of a sesh while we're doing that, then game on. Let's go.
Awesome. And that's it again. Happy Halloween, everybody. Have a great weekend. We're end of the weekend, but have a great, safe Halloween night tomorrow night. Until next time, keep lit and grow some. Arr!